I am the director of product marketing for Pro Video at Adobe, but in a past life, I was actually an editor. I worked in editorial and field producing for documentaries for about 10 years, so all of this is very close to my heart. So our next set of editors, I would like to welcome to the stage are Holle Singer, editor of Sugar Babies, and Stephania Dulowski, editor of Bunnylovr. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here with us today. So both of your films are really about a female protagonist who sort of takes hold of her own life and her own destiny, one through documentary and one through fiction. Yeah. What drew you to these projects as something that you wanted to be a part of?
For me, Rachel Flight, who is the director, she and I live in the same neighborhood. I've known her for years. I've loved her work. So I always wanted to work with her. And I remember we ran into each other grabbing food. We just ran into each other on the street. And she told me about what she was working on. And it was this documentary called Sugar Babies, about these virtual sugar babies, one piece of what it was about. I was like, virtual sugar babies? How does that work exactly? And she was like, uh-huh. So one thing led to another, and I wound up seeing some footage. And of course, it was about so much more than sugar babies. And it really became a film. And Rachel is so gifted at basically being very open and non-judgmental in whatever world she penetrates, whoever she talks to. She's just this incredible, generous, amazing way of looking at human beings, the full person in this honest way. And so it really became about looking at poverty, these people who are living in poverty in America and who are just trying to figure out where they belong. It was a very emotional film, and I was like, I want in, and one thing led to another, and the stars aligned, and we got to finally work together.
Isn't that always the way with documentary? It's like, well, it's about this, but it's actually about... And what about for you, Stephania?
Our film, Bunnylovr, is about intimacy, safety, and connection. And so this film is about a young Asian American cam girl who is navigating an increasingly toxic relationship with one of her clients. Meanwhile, she reunites with her dying estranged father. So the film, although like Katarina's character Becca is a sex worker, it's a film about, like, the heart of the film is about intimacy manifesting online and in person. So, I mean, I was just really drawn to the story, and Katarina's script is so non-judgmental and so empathetic, and it's just like a very nuanced story that, I don't know, I was just like, I just love kind of girlhood stories, and this was kind of a story of a woman navigating her life. She's trying to look for closeness in men, but she's also trying to be independent. She's trying to be safe, and like safety in terms of like even emotional safety, right? So I was just really interested in this, and I actually worked with one of the production companies prior to this film, Neon Heart Productions, whose most notable work was Shiva Baby. And so they were the production company on my first film that I edited called Tendaberry, which premiered at Sundance last year. So they put in a really good recommendation for me on this one. And then I met Katarina, and she was so delightful. And I was so excited to be a part of this one.
It sounds like for both of you that like trust was a really big part of both the stories that you were telling, but also the editorial process with your directors. So how did you go about sort of developing that trust with Rachel and Katarina as you embarked on the journey of these films?
I find that's a great question.
Especially for editors, because you're with the director every day for so long.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think proximity helped for me and Rachel. She lived a block from me. So a lot of times, instead of going to the city, to the office, we're in New York, and she and I both live in Brooklyn, and we're a block away, and we would be like, let's just work in your apartment. And I was like, I have the most janky setup. Like, I've got like one monitor. I can use Apple TV and try and get it. And that's how we worked. Like, she was sprawled on the couch. She'd bring her laptop. And I think that helped, that relaxed environment helped make sometimes difficult conversations easier. You know, it wasn't like we're in this formal place. So I think that helped. That helped. I mean, my cat's like on her and like, you know what I mean? It's just, it helps.
And I feel like when you're embarking on editing a feature, at least in my case, I feel like I'm always going to need to know someone prior to that feature or have made a connection with them or something, because you're with them every day for months. And I mean, Bunnylovr was a very fast edit. We cut it in 3 months, so that was insanely fast. But I really trusted Tristan and Rhiannon from Neon Heart. And so when they asked me about Bunnylovr, and they were kind of wanting me to do it, I was like, okay, I trust you guys. I haven't met the director yet, but I really trust you guys. I know I'll feel safe and protected and kind of be able to embark on this long journey with you. And then I met Katarina. And this is always something I'm still learning. This is my second feature. I'm still learning the right questions to ask in my director interview, you know? And the more I'm doing it and figuring it out, emotional intelligence is a really key part of in the edits, because editing is all about communication, and you need the director to be able to communicate their vision and whether something's working or not to you, and then you also need to do it back to them. So it's, yeah, I'm still learning the right questions to ask in the interview, but it's worked out so far.
And then with working with Katarina as the director and the lead actor, there was like an additional layer of trust that I'm sure you had to establish.
She is a triple threat, which is amazing. But I was really excited because I feel like in editing and filmmaking, I'm always trying to learn from different disciplines. And I was so excited that Katarina is the actress in the film, because I was going to learn about performance more. And I'm someone that is like, oh, I want to take an acting class or something just to learn more about editing, because it all feeds into the art of filmmaking. So it was really amazing to work with Katarina, who is the star of the film, and then to hear what takes she loved while we were screening dailies. And sometimes we would have differing opinions, but our sensibilities started to get closer and closer. So it was a great part of the process.
So you bring up the questions to ask in a director interview, which is interesting because I'm sure a lot of aspiring young people think, oh, that's when the director decides if they want you. But there's also the part that's the editor needs to decide if this is a project that you want to work on. So what are some of those questions? Can either of you share? Like what would you ask?
I mean, for me, a lot of times if it's, no matter what it is, I was going to say if it's narrative, but really anything, what is this film about?
Yeah.
Just the most simple. I feel like anything, you know, no matter how complicated, convoluted, time jumping, anything, the more simple the story is in some way, I find that super helpful for cutting.
Yeah, I feel the same with what is the story about? What are you trying to get out of this? Like, what are your intentions? Like, help me be on your team to navigate this. Also, I feel like a newer question I'm asking is, how do you deal with conflict? You know, like, can you vocalize if this edit is not going in the right direction? Can you vocalize that to me so we can make sure it gets there?
That's an amazing question.
Maybe I do too much therapy.
That's amazing. I mean, another thing I do ask, just to follow up, is the second question is usually, is there anything I should see that you love, that you were like, if it felt like this movie, if it was paced like this, anything that gives me a window into the feeling, into that world, into their world. I always look at all their stuff or start to, and if I say, well, I've saw this film and this film of yours, and if they say, great, those are the most two important, that happened one time, I was like, oh, good, because I have 10 films.
No, I think references are a key part of it. Like, I always love seeing the director's reference, because there is, for some, even if they can't fully articulate exactly the tone yet, there is something that they liked in what they're showing you. And so that helps us, as the editor, navigate the film towards their vision.
For both of you, your films are very contemporary topics, right? Very much now in the society that we are living in currently. And for Holle, you leveraged a lot of different types of media, from phones to social to, excuse me. How did you go about sort of weaving those together, and what were some of the challenges of that?
We had film because she had the lead person, Autumn, who we were following. She is a TikTok influencer. She had a whole life online, and on her phone. So we grabbed footage from that. We also were following some stories that were happening in the court system. So sometimes we would, while we're in the middle of cutting, I wonder, we would both be doing research, which was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Like, let's see what we can find. And it's incredible nowadays. You can just literally grab something online, load it in, throw it, like you don't have to convert it or anything. You just throw it right in your Premiere and you're cutting with it. So in that way, it was like amazingly simple. And it all reflected her world. I mean, she was almost living in two places, right? She has her life going to school in the real world and an entirely other life that she's living basically in her phone. So grabbing that material from all those different places made sense. It was such an honest part of her life. It was the best way, I think, to, Rachel and I found to present her world.
That's amazing. I have a quick question. When was the last day that you pulled more footage for the cut? Were you going up until picture lock with new footage from TikTok or no?
Probably until literally maybe the week of.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. I feel like it's endless when you're using footage from online. Like, it's not like there's one day where you have all the footage and then that's that. It's endless.
Yes.
Well, and what an interesting concept of like the character's online presence versus their how they live in the world and how they present themselves in their sort of IRL.
Yeah.
And how you present that in the film is a really interesting sort of approach for an editor.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that more and more we're seeing this, right? Like to communicate how people are communicating, you have to see text messages and you have to see all of these sort of media-centric ways that people are communicating with each other. How do you think that in terms of how we're living in society is going to start impacting how we're telling stories, how we're creating films?
I mean, I think we may see media, but there's a few things I think. I mean, one, I think that people can capture any footage they want, even on your phone. Everybody has a voice, and everybody now has the capacity to, if you have something you want to say and you want to make a film, I find that really fascinating that anyone can. I love films like Tangerine, where they just, grabbed an iPhone and made a feature. Even Creep, I like horror films. So, it's a brilliant, brilliant film. It's a great story with two great actors, and they had one camera, and they just, made this thing that's a terrifying movie. Yeah. So I think in that way, it's very democratic now. We all have a chance to put stuff out there.
I mean, exactly that. And it's also amazing because we have footage from TikTok, different cameras and stuff. Everything is so normalized. So the quality really doesn't matter too much as long as the heart of the story is there. It's always about story. So whether something is, on a photo or just a iPhone video, it's as long as the story is there, it doesn't really matter how you shot it.
It's so true. In fact, sometimes when something is super slick,
yeah,
it could look beautiful. You see a still, this is amazing, but it's lost all the humanity or all the...
It's too sterile almost,
yes,
right?
Totally.
I also think it's starting to sort of blur the lines between fiction and nonfiction because people are so used to sort of watching life unfold.
Yes.
And so there's like this, what's my life online? What's my line offline? How do I present myself? Is very interesting in terms of how storytelling is going to evolve in terms of how we just sort of navigate through the world.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what trends do you think we'll start seeing in terms of how filmmaking is evolving? Let's say like next 5-10 years. How do you think things are going to start shifting or continue on the trajectory that they're on?
I think the big one is, in terms of just story, is I think a lot of unconventional storylines are coming out more and more, and everyone as a society has definitely been more open lately to the types of stories we're seeing and watching. And I think that's the really exciting part for the future and for now. In terms of technology, I mean, I don't necessarily know the answer to that. You know, it's like stories are everywhere. They're on social media. They're just like, I don't know, but I'm not exactly sure where all it will go. But yeah, that's also a conversation for things that are more automated as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, even just the Oscar nominations this week, like you mentioned Tangerine, Sean Baker's trajectory from shooting a film all on iPhone to Anora having numerous, Oscar nominations this week. And Everything Everywhere All at Once last year. This line between what is independent film, what is traditional sort of industry is really starting to not be as significant.
And I think we were just talking about that a moment ago backstage, was that like a lot of these independent stories are pushing through and pushing the big studio films out of the way, and it's beautiful. It's like, yes, your indie story and film can really make it all the way, and it matters, and that those stories are very valid and taken seriously right now, which is great.
What about you, Holly? What do you think? Next 5 to 10 years?
I agree with everything that was said. Technically, I do wonder more maybe in the 10-year or how much our filmmaking is going to become immersive in some way. I don't know how that's going to look, but I think that VR and, I think I would not be surprised if somehow filmmaking went in that direction.
Yeah, I'm so curious about that. We got a Meta at home, and my fiance keeps saying, you're going to be editing in VR really soon. Like, you're going to be on it. And I know it's already happening out there. But yeah, hopefully it's not too much of that.
Well, to that point, how do you think the role of the editor is going to evolve with this sort of evolution of the industry?
I think it's a great question. I think Stephania brought up emotional intelligence. And there is AI. I'll say it.
Okay, I'm glad you said it. I didn't want to say it. I'm still not going to say it.
There is AI, right? And people can be like, cut this in the style of Hank Corwin, and it'll do it. But, there's an emotional intelligence that no computer is ever, I hope, is ever going to have, and will ever be able to replace another person. No. Having a conversation, having a trust, having that dialogue. Also, I love accidents. I love playing in the edit room. I love exploring. I love trying things. And I love, sometimes just like discovering something that I didn't even intend and being like, wow, that didn't work, but it's interesting for this. And, I don't know, is it AI or something? Like, I hope there's always a place for an editor in storytelling.
I think so, and I think automation maybe at some point will be able to do something roughly, but like you said, it's the stuff that is an experiment in editing. It's the unconventional. It's the things that you do that does not fit in the mold of editing techniques that really surprises you and really pulls out emotion in film. So I think we're not going to be too concerned yet.
What she said.
Well, it goes back to what Brian was saying earlier, right? That moment before you say action or after you say cut, and or the flush of someone's cheeks that really show an emotion is happening, or that is highly human.
Yes.
And that's the magic of the editor's vision into or contribution into the process.
Yeah. That's also why I never ask my editors to trim my slates, because I know some people do that. I'm like, I want to see every frame of the film, because you never know when you're going to use something, and there's plenty times I've used something before a slate marks.
Same way. Yeah. Sometimes people are like, I took that take out because it was flubbed and it did. Oh, no.
Yeah, don't do that.
The lighting was messed up, and it's like, well, sometimes that's exactly
even better.
Or you use it to cut. You never know. Yeah. Everything could have a place.
Yes.
Yep.
As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people watching are likely aspiring, next generation editors. What advice would you give for sort of how to hone that craft of finding those human moments, or building the emotional intelligence that inform your editing?
I mean, for me, I was given a piece of advice pretty early on. I remember a friend of mine who is an artist said, what's your favorite thing that you cut? And I was like, I haven't cut it yet.
Oh, I love that.
And she was like, oh, come on, you must like something you cut. And I was like, honestly, everything I see, all I see is, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, I could have done this. Oh, and it was painful. And she was like, you know, as an artist, I have to tell you, I learn more by looking at what does work than what doesn't. And I remember I tried that. I remember the exact job I was on, and I was like so frustrated. This isn't working. It's like doors closing, and you get tighter and tighter, and you can't see anything. And then I remember thinking of those words, and it was like, oh, let me follow that. Oh, that's kind of working. And where that led was so beyond, like someone was saying just before, it was just beyond anything I would have been able to think through, you know. So I would say, follow what works. Because that's where you find joy in it too. That's where you find openness and joy and surprises, and it's exciting.
No, and that exactly to your point is like, you really have to be open. And they were talking about earlier, there's so many times where a director asked me, oh, can you do this? And in my head, I'm like, that's not gonna work. And then you have to really balance it. You're like, no, I have to be really open right now and like show it them and walk them through. But then sometimes I realize like, I can't shut that down immediately because if I'm not open, I might miss something that is super experimental or something different that really works. And my other advice is just to always cut so much, like, you know, just cut anything you can, edit everything. I felt like when I started editing, I wasn't that talented. I really was like, I don't know if I'm like cut out to be an editor. And then I just started editing everything. So many different things, documentaries, fashion stuff, music videos. And then it's really, the more you do it, the better you get. The tricks, you like figure out the tricks, you really kind of expedite storytelling. And it's like, it really is about just getting the volume in. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. You
Holle-
learn, yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you learn all the time. I learn every single project.
Yes.
No matter how small, commercial, every single thing, because you're always starting again with that like lump of clay, right? You just have all that footage, and you're like, okay, here's 20 hours of footage. Make a 30-second spot.
And you're like, am I a good editor? Every project, I'm like, am I a good editor? This is my second Sundance in a row, and I'm like, am I a good editor?
My husband, he tells me every time he walks in when I start a project, I'm like, Reiner, I really suck at this. I just want you to know. And he's like, this is your process. This is what you do every job. And I'm like, yeah, but this one I know.
Lost
like,
it.
Who's letting me through? Who's letting me do this job?
Holle, Stephania, thank you so much for being here with us.
You,
we have
Meagan.
one more pair of editors, so I'm going to introduce. Thank you so much.